the forest moon of Ethiary, breathed with a rhythm that Zayn Malek had come to know as intimately as his own heartbeat. For 3 years, the emerald canopy had been his constant companion. The twin suns above painting shifting shadows across the reinforced panes of his research station, their golden light mingling with the faint glow of bioluminescent rain that often sifted down from the canopy like falling stars. His life was quiet, methodical, and deeply satisfying xenobiology samples catalogued in neat rows, hydroponic gardens tuned to perfection, engineering projects humming smoothly in their compartments. At 28, he was still considered young to be entrusted with such an isolated post, but solitude was not a burden to him. It was his element. The silence of the station gave him time to think, to create, and to marvel at the mysteries of Ethiary. That silence shattered in an instant when a thunderous crash rippled through the ground, jolting every sensor on his panel and setting his heart hammering. He rushed to the observation deck, his dark eyes wide as he scanned the canopy beyond. Smoke curled skyward from a clearing not far from his station, acrid fumes slipping through the air filtration system like a warning. Grabbing his emergency kit, Zayn hurried into the damp air, his boots sinking into moss as the canopy trembled above him with the aftershock of impact. What he found left him breathless. The vessel that had plummeted through the forest was unlike any entry in the Galactic Authority's ship records. Its hull grown rather than built, with organic curves and crystalline panels that pulsed faintly, even as they cracked and sparked with dying energy. From its fractured side came the sound of voices soft, layered, musical, like wind chimes whispering secrets. Then 2 figures stepped out of the wreckage, and Zayn felt the entire course of his life tilt. The first was slender and poised, silver fur catching the filtered sunlight in shimmering strands, her violet eyes filled with intelligence and something deeper, almost spiritual. She moved with elegance, her form-fitting metallic weave clothing rippling as she walked, tail curling behind her in what seemed a gesture of caution, but also respect. She would later name herself Estra of the Celestial Clan, and even in that first moment, Zayn sensed the quiet weight of wisdom in her gaze. But before he could speak, another figure emerged, her presence like fire to Estra's moonlight. Her fur was golden, striped with darker bands that suggested strength and motion, and her amber eyes flashed with bold confidence. Her stance was commanding, her practical garb designed for action, and the way she carried herself radiated unshaken authority even amidst wreckage. This was Valara of the Solar Clan, and her fiery energy seemed to clash instantly with Estra's calm grace. Both noticed Zayn at once, and the air tightened. Estra stepped forward first, her voice melodic as the translator crackled to life. "Honored being, I am Estra of the Celestial Clan. Our vessel has suffered catastrophic failure. I seek your aid to contact my people." She bowed with dignified precision, her silver tail flicking as if to seal the gesture. Valara immediately stepped ahead with a frown, her amber eyes fixed fiercely on him. "I am Valara, pilot of this ship, warrior of the Solar Clan. Assistance must be directed through me. We are not helpless scholars, human. We fight and endure." Her voice was sharper, her bow brisk, her posture radiating impatience. Zayn blinked between them, sensing their tension like static in the humid air. "I'm Zayn Malek," he said finally, steady but cautious. "You're both welcome in my station. I can provide shelter, repairs, medical treatment if needed." It was simple hospitality, an instinctive offering of peace, but the effect was immediate. Both aliens leaned closer, almost bristling with eagerness, as if each word of kindness must belong to one of them alone. In that moment, with rain beginning to fall like liquid jewels and the smoke of their ruined vessel rising behind them, Zayn knew his life was no longer solitary. 2 strangers had entered his world, radiant and dangerous, and their rivalry was not merely personal. It was something older, heavier, and far more dangerous than simple pride. He felt it beneath their words, like thunder rumbling before a storm. And though he did not yet know how, he sensed it would pull all three of them into a future. None of them could walk away from unchanged. The quiet hum of Zane's research station had always been like a heartbeat to him, steady and reassuring. But with Estra and Valara inside its walls, it now felt alive in an entirely different way, almost restless with tension. He had welcomed them through the airlock, offered water and a place to rest, but neither alien seemed inclined to relax. Instead, they prowled the corridors as if the station itself were a stage on which to outshine the other. Estra moved first, drawn to the hydroponic gardens Zane had carefully cultivated. With deft hands she brushed the leaves of his experimental plants, murmuring in her native tongue before explaining in crisp translated words. These are not merely crops, they are living symphonies. With minor adjustments, I could triple their yield while preserving the balance of nutrients. She smiled softly at Zane, violet eyes lingering on him with the weight of gratitude and admiration. Before he could respond, Valara's voice cut in, firm as a blade. Symphonies will not keep him alive if the power grid fails. She was already crouched by the control panel, her golden fur catching the overhead light as she pulled a tool from her belt and pried open the casing. Sparks danced at her touch, but her movements were confident, purposeful. Your distribution system is efficient, but flawed, she declared, glancing back at him with that fierce amber gaze. I can optimize it, make sure this station can withstand any assault or storm. Zane raised his hands in gentle defense, trying to stop the inevitable clash. There's enough here for both of you. This is my home, but I'll gladly accept your knowledge. Just please, no competition. The words fell into the charged air like stones into water, rippling but failing to calm. Every step he took, every word he spoke seemed to draw them closer, each determined to prove herself the more valuable companion. At dinner, the pattern only intensified. Zane prepared a simple meal from hydroponic greens and nutrient blocks, but Estra sat at his side almost immediately, guiding him through breathing exercises and meditation techniques from her clan. To aid digestion and harmony, she explained, her voice melodic, her silver tail brushing lightly against his chair, as if to remind him of her closeness. Valara, refusing to be outdone, leaned forward from across the table, her tone commanding. Solar warriors use breath differently, she countered, inhaling sharply and demonstrating a rhythmic pattern that filled the air with her steady confidence. It enhances nutrient absorption, strengthens the core. He should learn this instead. The words clashed like sparks, their eyes locking over Zane's shoulders as if the meal were a battleground got. By the time evening settled, the rivalry had spilled into his work. When Zane powered up his consoles to run calculations on the canopy's mineral deposits, both aliens immediately offered their aid. Estra traced the data with graceful fingers, explaining the botanical implications of each reading, while Valara leaned over his other shoulder, pointing out the engineering applications of the same results. Their competing commands sent conflicting inputs into the system, and before Zane could intervene, the lights flickered violently. The hum of his station faltered, panels dimming into emergency glow as a warning alarm pulsed red across the walls. For a heartbeat, all three stood frozen in the crimson shadows, the silence broken only by the hum of failing circuits. Zane exhaled, frustration heavy in his chest, and looked at them both. Estra's ears lowered in apology, her violet gaze softened with regret, while Valara's tail lashed with barely contained impatience, her pride unwilling to yield, even in the face of mistake. Yet beneath their rivalry, Zane sensed something deeper pressing between them, not mere stubbornness, but the weight of a history they carried silently, one neither seemed ready to reveal. He swallowed hard, the taste of smoke still lingering from their crash, and felt an unease settle in his bones. Whatever truth lay between these two was older than his station, older than his mission, and if he could not untangle it soon, the piece of ethery would no longer protect any of them. The alarm that jolted Zane awake in the middle of the night was unlike anything he had heard before. Not the familiar hum of a malfunctioning circuit or the occasional strain of atmospheric processors under storm stress, but a piercing, insistent wail that spoke of something alive moving in the forest beyond the reinforced panes. He stumbled from his quarters, half-dressed, pulse-pounding, to find Estra and Valara already awake, their ears twitching, tails tense, eyes wide with something primal. "They are close," Estra whispered, her silver fur bristling, violet eyes scanning the canopy through the glass. "Creatures that do not belong to this world's harmony." Valara's amber gaze was fixed on the console, her hands flying over the defensive systems as if she had known them all her life. Energy signatures are wrong-shifting, unstable. They emit resonance that feels hungry. Zane pulled up the external cameras, and his stomach turned. Shadows were moving through the bioluminescent rain, tall and lean with limbs too long and eyes glowing faintly purple, their forms blurring as if they slipped between layers of reality. He knew them instantly, though he had never expected to see them outside classified files. Shadow stalkers, predators of psychic energy, drawn to conflict, fear, and the bitterness between beings. The first attack came so swiftly, it was almost invisible. A figure phased through the outer wall like mist and solidified inside the main corridor, claws carving deep gouges into the metal floor with a sound like tearing bone. Zane's instincts, sharpened by years of training before research, kicked in. He seized his plasma rifle from the rack, aiming down its sights, but before he could fire, Estra leapt forward. From the crystalline device in her hand blazed a beam of pure light, the brilliance cutting across the creature and driving it back with a scream like splitting stone. "Creatures of shadow cannot withstand the clarity of light," she said, her melodic voice steady despite the danger. But Valara was already moving, her golden fur a blur as she drew twin energy blades that crackled with arcs of electricity. She struck low, her warrior's precision driving the shadow toward the wall breach. "Solar blood does not yield," she growled, every movement infused with fiery intensity. Zane added his rifle to their combined force, the three of them driving the intruder back until it dissolved into smoke and fled through the breach. For a heartbeat, silence reigned again, broken only by their panting breaths and the whine of damaged metal cooling. But Zane's sensors told a harsher truth: the station was surrounded. A dozen more signatures pressed at the edge of the forest, circling like wolves. "They're here because of you," Zane said before he could stop himself, eyes flicking between the two cat-like beings who stood poised and trembling in the flickering red light. "They're feeding on this thing between you. Your rivalry, your hatred, it's drawing them like blood in the water." Estra's ears flicked back, her gaze dark with guilt, but Valara's tail lashed, her defiance unbroken. "Our conflict is not so simple, human," she snapped. "It is the weight of generations. You cannot expect." Her words cut off as another crash split the corridor, and more shadows poured in, their claws gleaming, their forms twisting unnaturally. Zane gritted his teeth, rifle snapping to his shoulder, as Estra's light flared and Valara's blades whirled. The peaceful sanctuary he had known was now a battleground, his station's metal halls echoing with alien shrieks and the hum of weapons. And in the chaos, as he fought back to back with them both, Zane realized the truth. Unless he found a way to turn their rivalry into something else, something stronger, they would not survive the night. The night pressed on like an endless trial, the station shaking with every assault as the shadow stalkers slipped through walls and tore at metal as though it were cloth, their purple eyes blazing with hunger. Zane's arms ached from the recoil of his plasma rifle, his breath ragged inside the choking heat of failing ventilation. But what unnerved him more than the creatures themselves was the toll it was taking on Estra and Valara. Estra's crystalline light flared weaker with every strike, her silver fur damp with sweat, her melodic breaths uneven as she forced herself to hold her weapon steady. Valara's twin blades still cracked with golden energy, but her movements had lost some of their perfect confidence, her amber eyes shadowed by fatigue. Between attacks, they huddled in the central hub, water canisters open, ration packs torn apart, the dim red glow of emergency lighting painting them all in the same desperate shade. Zane studied their faces, the way Estra's eyes flicked toward him with quiet longing when she thought he wasn't looking, the way Valara bristled at every glance, not out of disdain, but something more complicated, fear of losing, fear of being overlooked. When the next wave came, stronger and more coordinated, Zane felt a flash of despair. The stalkers weren't weakening. They were growing bolder, faster, feeding on the invisible energy that filled the air between his two alien guests. One broke through the comms array, its claws carving dangerously close to the console that was their only chance of calling for outside aid. Zane dove in front of it, firing until his rifle overheated, sparks blistering his hands, and when he stumbled back, Estra was there, her light blazing as she interposed herself, shouting, "Your survival is worth more than mine." Her words rang with a truth too raw to ignore. A heartbeat later, Valara cut across, blades flashing, forcing the creature into retreat with a roar that seemed as much plea as battle cry. "No, human. My clan honors sacrifice. Let me be the shield." They weren't speaking to the stalkers anymore. They were confessing to him, raw and unguarded in the crucible of survival. And then, as the walls groaned and more claws scraped across steel, something in Zane snapped. He holstered his useless rifle, seized both Estra and Valara by the arms, and dragged them into his chest. For a moment they resisted, stiff with shock and pride, but then he felt it a tremor beneath their skin, a vibration like music. Estra pressed against him first, her body trembling, and a low, melodic purr spilled from her throat. Valara, her golden fur still bristling, locked eyes with her rival, but then her defiance broke, and her own purr rose to meet Estra's, deeper, steadier, thrumming through Zane's bones. The effect was immediate. The stalkers, who had been pressing forward in a frenzy, staggered back, their forms flickering, claws slowing as if struck by an invisible force. They shrieked in agony, not from weapons, but from the overwhelming harmony of comfort and safety that radiated from the three entwined figures. Zane held them tighter, heart hammering as he realized what was happening. Their rivalry had fueled the stalkers' hunger, but unity, even fragile, was poison to them. Estra's purr entwined with Valara's, discord melting into harmony, and for the first time since the crash they weren't competing, but resonating, their different tones blending into something larger, stronger. The shadows recoiled, hissing as their forms thinned into smoke and slipped back through the breached walls. Silence fell, broken only by the soft vibration of the two aliens pressed against him, their breaths mingling with his own. Zane dared not move, dared not release them, because he knew the fragile bond in that moment was all that had kept them alive. And as Estra's violet gaze met Valara's amber one over his shoulder, their ears lowered and their purrs deepened. He saw it. Not rivalry, not hatred, but recognition. Something had shifted between them, something ancient and bitter, cracked open by the presence of a human who had chosen to hold instead of divide. The night was not yet over, but for the first time, Zane felt a flicker of hope that they might survive it. They could find the courage to keep holding on. The dawn never truly broke on Etheary that morning. Instead, the twin suns rose behind heavy cloud, their light filtering dimly through the emerald canopy, as if the world itself held its breath. Inside the battered station, Zayn Malik felt exhaustion settle deep into his bones, yet he refused to close his eyes. Estra slept fitfully against one wall, her silver fur dulled with fatigue, her crystalline weapon clutched loosely in her hands. Valara sat cross-legged near the airlock, blades resting on the floor beside her, amber eyes still sharp despite the tremor in her muscles. The night's battle had taken everything from them. But what gnawed at Zane now was the new sound from the Comzerea, message pulsing through static. The voice of Captain Torres of the Galactic Defense Fleet. All stations in the Ethiary sector are to evacuate immediately. Shadow Stalker Hive confirmed in the planetary core. Evacuation ships inbound. Capacity limited. Save who you can. The words struck like a blow. Zane's chest tightened as he replayed them, as if repetition would make them less brutal. 1 ship, 6 hours. 1 spare seat dot when he told them. Estra bowed her head, her violet eyes soft with sorrow, tail curling around her knees. "You must take it, Zane," she whispered, her melodic voice heavy with quiet resignation. "I have walked many paths among my people. Meeting you was more than I ever hoped for. If my sacrifice ensures your survival, then let me give it freely." Valara rose at once, her golden fur flaring as if lit from within, fists clenching at her sides. "No," she snapped, her tone sharp as her blades. "It will be me. I am a warrior. My death is honor if it preserves the life of our rescuer. Estra's clan will endure without her. The Solar Clan will not forgive me if I do not fight to the end." The two cat-like figures squared off, their rivalry reignited, but shaped now by sacrifice instead of pride. Each desperate to offer herself, each unwilling to see Zane perish. He stood between them, his voice hoarse. "Stop, don't you see? Choosing between you is the same as condemning both of you. I can't do it. I won't." His words echoed hollowly in the scarred walls, but neither Estra nor Valara flinched. Both looked at him with the steady conviction of those who had already accepted death. And then, in the silence that followed, Valara's sharp gaze softened, her warrior's pride cracking just enough to let vulnerability through. She knelt by the wreckage of their crashed vessel, hands moving over its strange organic components, tracing the fractured crystalline panels as though listening to their heartbeat. Her amber eyes widened, and for the first time since her crash, her voice trembled with awe instead of defiance. "It has been adapting," she murmured. "Our vessel. It has been learning from the Stalker's resonance all night. See here neural pathways forming, not damaged, but evolved." Estra joined her, silver fur brushing golden, as they bent over the wreck together, for once forgetting to compete. Her violet eyes sparkled with realization as she added, "These filaments are emitting a counterfrequency. Weak now, but if amplified, it could disrupt the hive," Zane finished, his heart racing as he crouched beside them. "Starve them. Force them into dormancy without destroying them. But it would need more power, more stability than this station alone can provide." They looked at him then, both of them, and in their eyes he saw not rivalry, not sacrifice, but recognition of something terrifying and extraordinary, that the only way forward was not to choose one over the other, but to link all three of their strengths in unity. Estra's light, Valara's engineering, his human adaptability. It was dangerous, maybe fatal, but it was the only path that did not end in unbearable loss. For the first time, Valara's fierce amber gaze softened toward her silver-furred rival, and Estra's melodic voice carried no edge as she said, "Then perhaps the destiny our clans denied us will be forged here. Now, with him." Zane swallowed, his pulse hammering as he looked between them. The impossible decision had shifted. He no longer had to choose which woman to save. The true choice was whether he was brave enough to bind himself to both, and to risk everything on a harmony that had only just been born. The storm above Ethiary had quieted into a low, mournful rumble as if the moon itself were watching what unfolded within the battered station. 6 hours dwindled into minutes, and the evacuation ship's signal drew closer, a beacon of survival that offered only one of them escape. But Zayn Malik was no longer the same solitary researcher who had once found solace in silence. He stood now at the center of something larger, something fragile yet unbreakable, with Estra at his left and Valara at his right, their silver and golden fur brushing against his arms as the three of them worked feverishly over the vessel's organic wreckage. Estra's crystalline shards pulsed with soft violet light as she coaxed the biotech into resonance, her melodic whispers guiding the growth of neural threads. Valara's amber eyes burned with fierce focus as her hands twisted panels and rerouted living circuits, electricity sparking across her claws. And Zayn, sweat dripping into his eyes, adjusted the arrays of his own comm system, marrying human engineering to alien song. They were no longer rivals, no longer guests and host, but a single unit, their movements synchronizing like the beat of one heart. When the final connection locked into place, the air in the station thrummed, a deep harmonic pulse that vibrated through the walls, through their bones, through the very soil of Ethiary. The shadow stalkers, who had been circling unseen in the canopy, screamed in unison, their blurred forms staggering as the resonance struck them. Zayn felt Estra's hand grip his shoulder, trembling with strain, while Valara pressed against his other side, her breath sharp and ragged, yet her expression unflinching. "Now," she growled, and he slammed his palm onto the activation pad. The world erupted in light, not a blast, not destruction, but a wave of pure harmony that expanded outward, cascading through the forests and down into the planetary core. For a breathless eternity, it felt as if time itself had stopped. The stalkers convulsed, their forms unraveling, not into death but into dormancy, their hunger silenced by the overwhelming presence of unity. Across sensors, Zayn watched as thousands of signatures flickered, faltered, and sank into stillness. The hive had been forced to sleep again. Against all odds, the three of them had saved the sector. The evacuation ship descended moments later, its thrusters kicking up a storm of emerald leaves and golden dust. And Captain Torres himself strode through the airlock in disbelief. He found no desperate survivor begging for a single seat, but three figures standing together in perfect accord, their hands still linked over the glowing resonance array. "You contained a hive," he whispered, almost reverent, as if afraid to shatter what he was seeing. "Civilians, and two who should have been enemies. How?" Zayn only shook his head, his chest still heaving. "Not enemies, not rivals, not anymore." He looked at Estra, who gave him a soft smile filled with quiet wisdom, and at Valara, whose fierce gaze now burned with pride, tempered by something gentler. He had not chosen one over the other, but together they had chosen something new. 6 months later, Ethiary was no longer an isolated research post, but a diplomatic outpost, its halls alive with voices from across the galaxy. Estra oversaw botanical projects that fed colonies on the rim. Valara led engineering teams adapting biotech for peaceful use. And Zayn stood between them, human ambassador to a fragile but unprecedented alliance. Yet for all the politics and praise, their truest victories were quieter the way. Estra would hum while tending the gardens as Valara sharpened tools beside her, the way both would glance toward Zayn when he entered a room, their expressions not competitive but shared. At night, when the twin suns set in blazing orange over the emerald canopy, the three of them would stand at the observation deck together, shoulders touching, tails brushing against his legs, and simply breathe. The galaxy would call it a political miracle, the birth of the celestial solar alliance. But Zayn knew the truth in his heart. The greatest discovery on Ethiary was not the stalker's hive or the adaptive biotech, but the simple, impossible fact that love need not be bound by rivalry or reduced to a single choice. It could expand, encompass, harmonize. Three hearts beating together against the shadows. As the suns dipped and the stars came alive above the emerald moon, Zane tightened his arms around Estra and Valara both, and for the first time in his life he felt utterly, impossibly whole.